In the chill of January 1066, England stands at a crossroads, an ancient land of green hills and stone castles, about to be carved anew by the ambitions of men. King Edward the Confessor lies still in Westminster, and with him, the fragile peace his reign once promised. In his wake, three mighty contenders eye the English throne like hawks. The air is thick with the scent of wet earth, sweat, and brewing conflict. Sharp swords glint under grey skies as a king is crowned, alliances are tested, and distant shores stir with the whispers of war. England is on the brink, not of evolution, but of revolution. And in this crucible of ambition, the Battle of Hastings is set to forge a new destiny. Picture yourself in the austere chill of England in January 1066, where the winds seem to carry whispers of impending upheaval. The revered King Edward the Confessor, whose life was veiled in both devotion and mystery, lies on his deathbed. His gentle passage into the afterlife leaves behind not just a crown but a kingdom teetering on the brink of chaos. With no direct heir to take up his mantle, England becomes a stage for a fierce power struggle, its destiny balanced on the ambitions of three men, each driven by the same insatiable hunger for dominion. Edward's reign had been a tapestry, woven more of quiet diplomacy than overt warfare. Yet, his childless marriage to Edith of Wessex, rumoured to be more political than passionate, paved the way for a dangerous vacuum. As the kingdom mourned, those with power sighed, sensing opportunity in the winds. Edward's saintly reputation may have written his name into the annals of piety, but did little to secure the future of his realm. With his death, the corridors of power echoed with footsteps of those eager to step onto the English throne. Among these aspirants stood Harold Godwinson, a man who knew the landscape of English politics like the back of his hand. As the Earl of Wessex, he was not just a noble, he was a linchpin in the tapestry of the kingdom's power. Harold's claim stemmed not just from ambition, but was seemingly affirmed by the dying king himself. A fleeting moment whispered to some, and dismissed as a fabrication by others. Circumstances propelled him to the throne mere hours after Edward's soul departed, an elevation filled with both necessity and scepticism. His swift coronation may have sealed one chapter, but it also opened doors to strife as England's new king now faced shadows of dissent and mistrust. Across the sea, in Normandy, the resolute William watched England's unfolding drama like a hawk. His claim to the English throne was founded on promises exchanged and allegiances forged in earlier, simpler times when Edward sought refuge in Normandy. William's resolve was unshakable, his plans meticulous. He embodied the spirit of a Norman culture infused with martial prowess and an unyielding drive for expansion. To William, the crown of England wasn't a distant dream but a tangible goal, woven into his very identity by familial ties and the whispered oaths of a past alliance. Further north, another contender claimed his right. Harold Hardrada of Norway, a king moulded by the icy winds and fierce lore of the Viking world. To many his bid was audacious, but history had gifted him a connection through old treaties and wartime pacts. Hardrada saw the English crown as both a prize and an opportunity to reignite the Norse adventurous spirit. His name cultivated fear and admiration. The Viking spirit, a legend that had burned brighter with each tale of conquest and glory. In this medieval world, power was a mercurial force sculpted by alliances as fragile as spun glass, and by the unyielding shadow of warfare. The absence of a direct heir was a clarion call for every lord with eyes on English soil. Battles were not just inevitable, they were written into the weathered skin of the kingdom. where treaties lasted only as long as swords were sheathed. Power was a gleeful dance on shifting sands, where ambition and betrayals wrote the laws of the land. The claims to Edward's throne were not only personal desires, but echoes of greater cultural narratives. The Saxon traditions that coloured England were now confronted by competing influences: Norman chivalry and Viking ferocity. England was more than just land, it was a precipice where worlds clashed. The influence of these conquests carried ideological weight, promising a transformative wave that would redefine the linguistic and legal fibre of a nation. The medieval ethos regarded war as a divine mandate, entwined with concepts of honour and destiny. For the common folk, life ebbed and flowed under a constant cloud of turmoil, where leadership determined not just who sat on the throne, but who provided protection against the looming night of uncertainty. The question of who would sit on the throne was as essential to them as the very air, threads that intertwined with their daily struggles for survival in a landscape where myths and reality blurred. As the soft golden glow of sunset marked the end of Edward's era, it signified the calm before a tempest that would lay claim not just to a crown, but to the very soul of England itself. The dance of dominance that followed wasn't just about power, it was a mélange of ancient cultures and destinies swirled together in a cauldron of ambition and conquest. This was the beginning of England's reimagining, a saga where the echoes of swords and the whispers of scripture would soon intertwine, tracing a new line through history's intricate weave. In the frosty dawn of January 5th, 1066, a hushed tension gripped Westminster. King Edward the Confessor lay on his deathbed, his life ebbing away in shallow breaths and whispers that barely disturbed the cold stillness. His reign, a tapestry of piety and political cunning, reached its quiet end without the clarity of an heir. Some say it was devotion, not circumstance, that left his throne without a successor. And in that dim, candle-lit chamber, shadows danced with the uncertainty that hung thick in the air. Beyond those walls, nobles gathered, their breaths mingling with the chill to form visible puffs, each mindful of the kingdom's precarious future. Edward's passing, barely a whisper more than a breath, kindled ambitions and set the stage for a year destined to engrave itself indelibly in England's history. The weight of the kingdom's fate hung with each flicker of candlelight as Edward's life tapered to its end. The death of a king seldom marked just the conclusion of a reign, but the closure of a lineage, one that oversaw England's growth from disparate kingdoms into a unified realm. The Witan, the assembly of the nobility and clergy, stood poised to decide the realm's future. Yet, their decision would ignite a fierce and bloody contest, as rival claimants hovered like falcons awaiting their chance. In that suspenseful air, the question rippled through the corridors. Who would don Edward's crown? The answer, carved by ambition and fate, would prove both swift and contentious. Upon Edward's death, Harold Godwinson's coronation took place almost at the next heartbeat, on January 6, 1066. As if fate itself nudged events along, Harold's ascent was as unexpected as it was rapid, giving rise to whispers of controversy among the gathered nobility. To some, he was an opportunist with the shrewdness of a fox. To others, a necessary bulwark against chaos. Lacking regal blood, Harold was nonetheless an adept statesman and military leader, qualities that lent his sudden kingship a veneer of inevitability. His rule seemed to promise stability, a steady ship in the storms of an unpredictable world. Yet across the narrow stretch of the Channel, William, Duke of Normandy, seethed at the news. For him, Harold's rapid coronation was not only a political affront, but a personal betrayal, as he believed Harold had swayed his allegiance during a visit to Normandy 2 years prior. Rumours spoke of oaths sworn on sacred relics, binders of faith and honour that Harold was purported to have broken. This perceived perfidy, a sword inciting William's fury, made Harold more than a king. It marked him a target. Thus began a sequence of events that spiralled into a deluge of bloodshed, setting a course to reshape England's destiny under threads of conquest and ambition. In England, opinions were as varied as the tapestry of its haunted vales. Some denounced Harold's quick rise as theft. Others saw a leader with the political acuity needed in such turbulent times. The Witan deemed Harold the right choice, seeing in him the strength to fend off threats from Normandy and Norway. For the common folk, matters of oaths and lineage were distant abstractions. Their concerns were earthy, rooted in the need for security, for a king who could protect the tatters of their trembling peace. In such times where survival turned like a wheel, promises and identifications frayed at the edges of necessity. Harold's journey to kingship threads through the strands of opportunity and the strength of his lineage. Born into the powerful Godwin family, Harold's life was enmeshed in politics, his destiny forged by the hands of his father, Godwin, Earl of Wessex. Known for his strategic brilliance on the battlefield and his diplomatic skill in council, Harold had stamped his mark long before claiming the crown. His reputation, tempered by the challenges of Welsh campaigns, made him a figure of reliability among England's nobility. Through unyielding alliances and shared victories, Harold stood as a kingmaker by fate and design, ready for the legendary struggles that awaited. Across the Channel, the news kindled William of Normandy's wrath. A man renowned for precision in thought and action, William viewed Harold's act as a grievous breach of faith. In Normandy, word of Harold's alleged betrayal acted as a clarion call, empowering William's cause to reclaim what he deemed rightfully his. The Duke's vengeance transcended mere arms and extended to diplomatic overtures, garnering the Pope's blessing and transforming his campaign into a sanctified endeavour. Under banners graced by the divine, William's forces prepared for a mission laden with conquest and holy purpose, a war unlike any yet seen by the Isles. Harold's crowning embroiled him in dilemmas rather than luxuries. The dual threats from Normandy and Norway loomed large, demanding a king who could fortify borders while firming internal dominions. Harold's immediate tasks saw him reinforcing coastal defences and solidifying alignments among the volatile English nobility. While emissaries carried his words across shires, rallying support was essential to the combative storms ahead. Yet beyond steel and bannerman, Harold's true struggle lay in navigating the hazardous intricacies of power, where each choice bore the potential to tilt the balance of fate. England stood at a crossroads, with Harold Godwinson's reign poised to face the crucible of destiny under the shadow of impending war. Harold Hardrada, renowned as the Hard Ruler, wasn't just any Viking king. His name alone was enough to spread fear across northern Europe, a legend wrapped in human form. His ambition for the English crown was both a nod to Viking dreams of expansion and his personal quest for eternal glory. England beckoned with its promise of power and wealth, a coveted jewel drawing not just claims but also Hardrada's determination. Joining him at this daring bid was Tostig Godwinson, Harold's own brother turned adversary, who brought with him not just familial betrayal, but an army of seasoned Viking warriors eager for plunder and prestige. The death of Edward the Confessor had left a throne without an heir, an irresistible opportunity in a land rich with tales of fertile fields and treasures glinting on the horizon. As Hardrada's longships cut through the sea's dark waves under the eerie glow of the northern lights, they carried with them ambitions writ large across the sky. Upon landing at the mouth of the Humber River, his forces, a relentless tide of iron and leather, poured onto English soil. The air crackled with the anticipation of conquest as dragon prows sliced through mist, announcing their arrival with grim intent. Coastal villages were caught off guard as these unwelcome visitors swept through, the smell of smoke intertwining with the morning dew as homes burned and villagers faced the sharp bite of axes and spears. The march inland left a trail of ruin, strongholds crumbling, and the silence of defeat replaced by the clash of steel and the anguished cries of the fallen. Nonetheless, this was more than mere savagery. It was conquest driven by an ancient rhythm, the invaders adhering to customs as old as the runes they wore. Their braided hair and fur-covered bodies spoke of the cold lands that had borne them, moving with an efficiency that bespoke their heritage. Meanwhile, Tostig urged them on, his vendetta against his brother fueling each step forward, layer upon layer of betrayal, adding to the gathering storm. In the south, Harold Godwinson, newly crowned and vulnerable, was faced with the grim necessity of defending his realm. The news of Viking incursion was a call to arms, a necessity that would see him embark on a legendary march from south to north across England, a journey of 200 miles achieved in mere days. This was not just a rallying of forces, it was a Herculean test of endurance that challenged flesh and resolve alike. Harold's men, driven by loyalty and love for their homeland, surged forward, their voices a murmur of steadfast determination against the rustle of leaves and the clatter of armour. Each step carried them not just closer to the enemy, but deeper into a defining saga that would culminate at Stamford Bridge, a tale where fear, weariness and fervour met on a grassy plain. The morning of September 25th, 1066, dawned with deceptive serenity. As Hardrada's forces readied themselves for another day, Harold's army arrived outside Stamford Bridge, their presence a swift revenge wrapped in loyalty. Caught off guard, the Vikings hastily formed ranks but were hemmed in by the River Derwent and an advancing English tide. The battle that ensued was fierce, the air alive with the clangour of weapons and the cries of men locked in a struggle embodied in epic tales. The Viking shield wall, a formidable fortress, buckled and swayed against the tenacity of English might, a contest not just of arms, but of wits as Harold pressed home a strategic advantage against an unprepared foe. Amid this chaos, history wove itself into legend as warriors lived and died on that bloody field. Among the fallen lay Harold Hardrada, a spear ending his saga with a quiet finality that spoke volumes. His demise was not just the fall of a leader, it was the extinguishing of a myth. The Norsemen, stripped of their guiding beacon, faltered, their courage adrift without Hardrada's steady hand. The loss rippled through their ranks, extinguishing the spark of defiance as the realization of their defeat blotted out hope. Tostig Godwinson too met his end here, a villainous arc concluded in tragedy. His ambitions, like those of Icarus, crashed ignobly, fueled by hubris and vengeance. To Harold, his brother's death was not triumph, but a bittersweet tableau against the backdrop of victory, a reminder of familial bonds turned to ash amid war's relentless grip. Yet victory at Stamford Bridge tasted bitter in Harold's mouth, a triumph shadowed by foreboding. The battle had sapped his forces, men left weary and battered, their ranks thinly stretched. While the fields bore witness to a hard-won victory, another threat loomed, a storm brewing across the Channel, in Normandy's Duke William. Harold's relief was short-lived. His warriors, triumphant yet tired, faced the imminent reality of another conflict, unable to savour peace amid celebrations' muted cheers. In the north, England bore the scars of Viking passage. Villages marred by fire faced the grim task of rebuilding amid ash-covered ruins, tales of terror lingering as reminders of fragility. Even as life resumed, whispers of new dangers rippled from the south, a Norman menace casting a long shadow. Harold, keenly aware of the ticking clock and battered by the weight of expectation, prepared for another clash. With patience stretched thin and the kingdom on the brink, he awaited his next test. William's impending descent, destiny drawing its fateful breath as history readied to pen another chapter. The year 1066 unravelled a thread of unexpected events, weaving a tapestry that would forever alter the English landscape. Edward the Confessor, a king whose reign once instilled calm, left the throne untethered to a single heir. In its wake followed an epic struggle for power, encompassing the fiercest of ambitions across Europe. Among these was William, Duke of Normandy, a man who interpreted the winds of fate as his own. This was not mere avarice driving him, but a crusade under the auspice of divine approval. When news reached William that Pope Alexander II had dispatched a consecrated banner, the ripples of religious fervour stretched across the Channel. This banner was no mere piece of cloth, it was a magnetic force, drawing men from every corner of Europe into a cause cast as a celestial mandate. Wheel churning in William's mind, the papal endorsement wrapped his ambitions in a shroud of holiness, elevating a conquest of realms to the realms of sainthood. Such piety was compelling, a siren call that promised not only land and glory, but also a sense of purpose divinely ordained. The ranks of his army swelled, a fusion of fierce warriors and devout believers, allured by the dual promise of reward and righteousness. The medieval world was awash with superstition and faith, where relics like the papal banner inspired warriors to feats of valour beyond their own limits. Yet William understood that zeal alone would not suffice. The brewing invasion needed an army formidable enough to face England, grizzled from its own conflicts. Collecting soldiers from Normandy and as far as Brittany, Flanders and Italy, he created a melting pot of seasoned fighters, each drawn by tales of Anglo-Saxon riches and the assurance of an eternal cause. For this venture across the Channel, William orchestrated not just a fleet but a spectacle of medieval theatre, with ships crafted to navigate those turbulent waters. Smithies echoed with the hammering of nails into wooden hulls, bringing to life a floating city, armed and dangerous. The English stood oblivious to William's storm building across the water, while embroiled in their tumultuous wranglings. Power had shifted ominously with Harold Godwinson's rushed coronation, following Edward's demise. Edward had left a kingdom plagued by dissent. Rivals nursed ancient grievances, fracturing unity and paving inroads for William. When Harold turned north to face the Viking Harold Hardrada, southern realms simmered with their own conflicts and shifting allegiances. As William's forces gathered, nature played its cunning game, conjuring winds, unpredictable and tempests of doubt. Trapped within Norman ports, days stretched into weeks as William and his men wrestled with the waiting. The sky seemed to conspire against them, testing their fortitude. But in waiting, strength tempered like steel in fire. The men drilled, their idle moments transformed into cohesion under a single banner, while Harold's troops languished, stretched thin over England's rugged expanse. Frustration gave way to revelation. In those intervals of perceived stagnation, William's army emerged finely honed. When the winds relented, the Channel's waves carried not just armaments, but a sight to command awe and fear alike. William's armada, silhouetted against the horizon, proclaimed to the world the birth of something formidable. Norman knights and infantry, their armour glinting under the decrepit autumn sun, became an awe-inspiring force as the papal banner led their procession. It was an overture to conquest, a message scripted in divine and military might. As they disembarked at Pevensey, their destination bore witness to an epoch changing underfoot. Swift, strategic, William seized locales with methodical efficiency, leaving English soil reverberating with the foreign clamour of his army. Not mere footfalls of an enemy, but seismic shifts foreshadowing the transformation of the island nation. William approached conquest with a dual strategy, stirring terror and extending olive branches to those ready for alliance, recognising the potency of negotiations as an ally in war. Blessed by Rome, William's campaign wore the vestments of a holy mission. He wielded his papal backing as both shield and lance, not only dispelling doubts about his motives, but also forcing Harold into a moral quandary. Their conflict transcended mere mortal battle lines. It was an ideological clash sanctified by celestial decree, a confrontation where blades met beliefs and ambitions masqueraded as creeds. When October dawned, with its mists rising over the Sussex coast, these lands did not anticipate tranquility, but a tempest growing in force. Ever prescient, William's presence portended not just a temporal occupation, but a cultural renaissance echoing through moors and meadows. As Norman embarked upon Saxon, edifices, roles and identities were reinvented, symphonies of foreign tongues and confounding customs merged and clashed. This war, however, veiled in holy dedication, was at its heart, a narrative of personal ambition, where William sought to etch his name into the immortal legends spun by bards and scribes. The stakes soared beyond crown and country, the essence of legacy condensed into this pointed crusade. A tale unwound through audacious endeavours, each embarkment not merely a step into battle, but an inscription into history's relentless annals. As fall's frost crept and the curtain rose for the Battle of Hastings, the stage set was not one of mere genealogy, but the looming chronicle of a nation's rebirth. Under the spectre of this climatic fray, armies converged, but the tides were already turning with Norman ascendancy. Here on this soil, resisting against fate's inexorable march, the destiny not solely of England, but of the Middle Ages trembled upon the brink. After the triumphant yet exhausting victory at Stamford Bridge, Harold Godwinson's army found itself in a state of weary dishevelment. The 200-mile expedition to quell the Viking threat, led by the fearsome Harold Hardrada, had sapped their strength and morale. These soldiers craved rest and a moment to breathe before facing yet another tumultuous challenge. However, rest was a luxury they could ill afford, for news of William of Normandy's looming invasion weighed heavily on them. Harold faced a perilous decision: risk giving the Normans time to entrench, or gamble on a rapid march southward to engage before William fortified his position. In the north, the air was thick with echoes of exhaustion and burnt wood, yet there was also a faint whiff of resolve, a reminder of the shieldwalls' strength that had served them at Stamford Bridge. Harold's choice to head south seemed impulsive, yet undeniably strategic, a decision tempered by the very urgency of medieval warfare. His army, buoyed by their recent success, soldiered on. The urgency was palpable, as if every step was a ticking clock, with fate itself hanging in the balance. Meanwhile, southern England braced itself for William's landing. The south was shrouded in anxiety, the rumours of William's landing at Pevensey spreading like wildfire, igniting both fear and determination. Locals watched with bated breath as William constructed castles, projecting power and intent. This wasn't mere raiding, it was the methodical work of conquest. The south echoed with cultural tensions, the savoury scent of French songs mingled with the familiar, earthy tales of England. William's strategy was chillingly effective, scorching the land of potential provisions while choking the air with the acrid tang of smoke. The anticipation was almost suffocating, and the ground seemed eager to drink the blood which history's outcome demanded. Harold confronted his own quandary: conserve and defend, or boldly attack with a weary army. Such decisions exemplified the harsh immediacy of his era. His leadership was forged in such crucibles, surrounded by advisors who either cautioned or urged boldness. Determined, Harold opted for the latter, underestimating the toll that would yet lay heavy on his men. The decision was not only imperative, but implacable, showcasing Harold's gamble in the eyes of an uncertain history. As the Norman threat burgeoned by the day, he called his forces to London, ever the heart of a burgeoning medieval England, assembling what strength he could muster. The streets bustled, vibrating with the chatter of anticipation and the weight of heavy armour and arms. They still processed the victory at Stamford Bridge, even as they braced for the vendetta to come. The looming presence of William's forces demanded swift assembly and reinforcement of the capital's defences, echoing the medieval city's anxious heartbeat. Bells tolled endlessly, icons of their era's devotion, ringing both solstice and challenge. The journey south was gruelling. Each step was imbued with memory. Stories shared around campfires, the flicking flames singeing the edges of hope and fear. The soldiers' feet pressed into the earth, their purpose echoing through the grunts of exertion, dragging a tide of inevitability behind them. Despite their king's leadership and the camaraderie built in battle, exhaustion pitched its camp in taut muscles, loosening the otherwise steely grit that marked England's destined stand. Harold's men pressed on, marching into history with firesides of dreams shared in weary whispers, blending nostalgia with necessity. Diplomacy played its hand. Emissaries crisscrossed the war-torn realm, weaving a fragile tapestry of oaths and alliances, each sworn promise a thread of hope, woven against the dread of Norman might. Trust, a fragile currency, was cautiously traded amidst promises of lands, favours granted to secure shire after shire. Loyalty was volatile. Everything rested on Harold's ability to harness this allegiance swiftly, to shield the future he envisioned. Leadership was more than chainmail and rallying calls. It was the intangible weaving of lineage into the resolve to march yet onwards. Through tales of valour and legacy, Harold reignited the core of his army's devotion, intertwining ancient narratives with the very real need to confront William's perceived prowess. Each assertion of ancestry inflamed and fortified weary spirits, a rally against the break of morale in the face of autumn's chill. The symbolism intensified, embodying the ethos of those kings who came before and those unblemished by foreign ambition. And so onwards to Hastings, where the final clash would echo across time, a convergence of English hearts and foreign steel. The faded roads, resilient beneath a soldier's boot, carried their secret burdens towards destiny. Each mile whispered of the past, the stories of sacrifice and glory promising a new chapter carved in blood and stone. As they approached, a telling silence fell, as if Hastings itself held its breath. Here would unfold the irony and impact of life's strange dance. On this field, where the unique cadence of medieval resolve met its trial under the vast witness sky. As the dawn of October 14th, 1066, broke over the Sussex hills, two mighty armies stood poised on the brink of history. The English forces, led by King Harold Godwinson, had taken a strategic position on Senlac Hill, their defensive shield wall, a testament to ages of warfare. Armed with spears and axes, their shields interlocking with rugged precision, these men stood as the bulwark of a kingdom, their resolve as unyielding as the timber and iron guarding them. Across the field, the Normans under Duke William of Normandy prepared to advance. Their army, a disciplined mix of knights, infantry, and archers, was a finely woven tapestry of lethal intent. Mounted knights, imposing and polished, were ready to unleash a fury honed through rigorous training. William's banner flapped with papal blessing, a visible merging of divine favour and earthly ambition, adding a layer of spiritual consequence to mortal conflict. When the signal came, the Normans advanced, the thunder of hooves echoing like a storm upon the sea. Their cavalry, lances set for impact, aimed to shatter the Saxon line, but the shield wall held firm. English axes rose and fell with grim resolve, each swing a testament to their determination. Amid brutal cries, arrows arced overhead, a deadly rain that failed to weaken Harold's staunch defenders. The chaos of combat was punctuated by the clash of metal, the cries of the wounded, and the relentless sounds of battle, an orchestra of destruction in an ageless contest between order and chaos. Yet the Saxons, driven by the imperative of defence, refused to yield. Their wall, not just a physical barrier but a symbol of unity, absorbed assaults with stoic resilience. As Norman cavalry continued its waves of attack, the English shield wall stood, unwavering in the face of annihilation. Individual acts of valour emerged, knights and foot soldiers finding within themselves a deep reserve of heroism. Even as sporadic breaches occurred, the English responded with vigour, reinforcing gaps with unyielding tenacity. The battle was as much a test of endurance as of skill, a grim reality where strength alone was insufficient, a testament to the timeless dance of war. Recognising a futile frontal strategy, Duke William strategized anew. Understanding the Saxon strength, yet also their limits, he adapted his approach with cunning precision. The Normans began a methodical assault with archers and infantry to weaken the Saxon fortitude before committing cavalry anew. With a revised plan, Norman tactics shifted. Arrows blackened the sky, intent on breaking the cohesion enforced by the shield wall. Each charge thereafter operated under a guise of deception, seeking not sheer destruction, but a loosening of the enemy's hold. This adaptation illustrated a key contrast between the armies, the Saxons driven by strength, the Normans by calculated versatility, using every engagement to sow seeds of doubt and fatigue within the English ranks. Despite this, the Saxon wall retained its integrity, a tribute to unity and discipline. Harold moved among his men, offering encouragement and affirming their resolve. The chants of the English resonated through the conflict, a building communal spirit forged from loyalty to king and country. However, the relentless nature of battle took its toll as noon stretched toward afternoon. Fatigue seeped into weary limbs, armour grew unbearably heavy, and shields began to show signs of their ordeal. The Saxon line faltered not from lack of will, but from sheer exhaustion, a battlefield truth even the most gallant could not outrun. Sensing an opportunity, William pressed his advantage, intensifying the Norman onslaught to prevent any chance for the Saxons to regroup. Among Harold's followers were his brothers, Leofwine and Gurth, who fell at the height of battle, their deaths striking a blow deeper than iron could reach. The loss resonated through the English lines, compounding the strain but also igniting a desperate fury. Harold, resolute in the face of personal tragedy, rallied his warriors, their cries mingling with the tragedy-turned valour that defined so much of their shared existence on this field. Overshadowing all, the battle danced with threads of fate and destiny. Saxons and Normans alike infused the melee with superstition, each thrust and parry tied to notions of divine favour. For both armies, victory carried an implication beyond the tangible, a testament to unseen hands at work on this October day. The Saxons, believing in their sacred duty, clung to tradition as their scaffold of faith. Across the lines, the Normans bore the symbolic weight of the papal banner, reinforcing their cause with an aura of celestial decree. Within this crucible of conflict, individual feats of bravery surpassed expectation. That day saw English and Norman warriors alike rise to legendary acts. Saxon defenders repelled charges with ethereal defiance, while Norman knights, driven by courage, sliced through defences, a vivid reminder that valour could transcend the confines of mere mortality. Amidst this clash, William recognised the need for cunning over force. His decision for a feigned retreat revealed an astute tactical shift, drawing the Saxons from their hilltop stronghold. The ensuing Norman counterattack became a masterstroke written in the language of deceit, a reversal that shifted chaos to advantage. In the end, Hastings was more than battle, it was transformation incarnate, a story of conquest laced with resilience, a moment where an ancient world yielded to the inexorable pull of change. If this strange little slice of medieval life stirred curiosity or stirred your stomach, give us a like. And if you're hungry for more gritty tales from the dark side of history, subscribe to Medieval Grime. We serve our history smoked, salted, and a little bit cheeky. Thanks for watching. Stay grimy and we'll see you next time by the fire. In the swirling chaos of the battlefield at Hastings, strategy was paramount. William of Normandy, a seasoned tactician, faced a formidable challenge: the English shield wall. This defensive formation, composed of interlocking shields and stout men, held firm against numerous frontal assaults. The high ground advantage of the English only reinforced their position. Yet as the sun arched across the sky, William understood that brute force was futile against such a resilient defence. A new approach was needed, one that required a deep understanding of human nature. Thus, the feigned retreat was born. By simulating a hasty flight, William and his forces tapped into a primal instinct, the urge to pursue retreating enemies. With a calculated gamble, he sought to unspool the tightly woven English defence. As the Norman cavalry turned their backs, pretending to flee, the English, buoyed by a sense of victory, broke ranks to chase. It was a moment of exhilaration, an illusory triumph that crumbled the cohesion of their shield wall. What had been a united front now became a disparate collection of individuals, driven by adrenaline and the tantalising prospect of routing the Normans completely. The rugged landscape echoed with the cries of men, and the stony ground beneath their boots turned treacherous. William watched from afar, his shrewd gaze ever calculating. the breaking of the shield wall was not just a lapse in discipline, it was an opportunity, and he seized it with audacious flair. As the Normans pivoted, the retreat dissolved into a rallying counterattack, transforming the battle's dynamics entirely. The English shield wall, once an emblem of steadfast defence, crumbled under this new assault. The Huscarls and Feirdmen, staunch defenders of their king, found themselves vulnerable, their ranks scattered across Senlac Hill. The heavy, metallic aroma of blood mingled with the earthy scent of churned soil, as the English, out of formation, faced the disciplined onslaught of Norman knights. It was a masterclass in battlefield psychology. The feigned retreat was not only a strategic manoeuvre but a mental game, exploiting the weaknesses inherent in the English's seemingly invincible tactics. The shifting tides of battle momentarily lifted, only to crash back down, with the Normans pressing their advantage home. Yet the impact of William's gambit extended beyond immediate victory. The psychological erosion of the English forces was as devastating as the physical assault. The triumph they had tasted moments earlier soured into desperation, a bitter draught of impending defeat. Harold's men, stripped of their cohesion and confidence, stood exposed to the ruthless precision of the cavalry charge, their morale shattered. The battlefield became a tableau of confusion and dread, the sound of clashing steel mingling with shouted orders and cries of anguish. The sky seemed to darken, cloaking the field in a grim tapestry woven from the threads of courage, cunning, and collapse. William's strategy at Hastings was more than a tactical innovation. It was an embodiment of the cunning that defined medieval warfare. Long before this echo of arms, feigned retreats were known, a trick employed across historical epochs, yet they required discipline that few armies could muster. That day, William demonstrated how intellect and instinct could intertwine, manoeuvring beyond raw strength into the realm of psychological mastery. The weight of his victory pressed down, not only altering the tide of the battle, but transforming the narrative of English resistance. As the dust settled, the once mighty English defence lay in ruins, its discipline undone by William's artful deception. In the ensuing chaos, the English, once stalwart defenders, faced grim choices. The soldiers who remained struggled against not only Norman blades, but the shattering realisation that the world they knew had changed irreparably. Death's grim spectre hovered over the field, and survival turned into a desperate flight from William's inexorable advance. Anguish mingled with the earthy sweat of fear, and for those who once fought under Harold's banner, the loss transcended the battlefield. It was the aftermath of their way of life. Their reality dissolved into the shadows cast by a new Norman dawn. Yet the effects of Hastings rippled far beyond this single day of carnage. William's cunning didn't just unseat a king, it recast an entire nation's future. Within the span of months, the landscape of power shifted, architected by Norman hands. Castles rose as stern sentinels of control, and the intricate web of feudal tenets took root. Old traditions began to intertwine with new, and the evolution of England fostered a cultural weaving that encompassed law, language, and societal frameworks. The Norman victory wasn't merely a conquest by arms, but a profound reordering of an entire society. As William etched his mark upon England's history, the resonance of his strategies found relevance in conflicts yet to come, echoing through time as a testament to the art of war. Hastings became a keystone in the annals of military strategy, demonstrating that the mind's blade, honed with strategy and insight, could slice through even the most ironclad of defences. Thus, Hastings entered the chronicles of history, not as a mere battle, but as a defining moment of audacity, adaptation, and enduring influence. As afternoon shadows cast long fingers over Senlac Hill, the battlefield's a cacophony of clashing swords and cries of the wounded. The air is thick with the smell of sweat and blood. At the heart of this turmoil stands Harold, embodying the grim determination of his Saxon warriors. His resolve inspires, his presence fortifies. Yet in the chaos piercing through the noise, an arrow destined by history finds its mark. Whether it truly pierces his eye or becomes an emblem of his downfall, the narrative is less about fact and more about the swift turn of fortune's wheel. The brutal noise of battle is such that even a king's death could easily be just another scream in the air. Yet Harold's fall is not just personal, it is a shudder that ripples through the ranks, shaking the very core of English defence. In this surreal melee, time blurs and stretches. Chroniclers, their memories touched by legend and time's distortions, sing of a noble fatality etched into the annals of folklore. Amidst the onslaught, Harold's agony goes unseen, a ghostly whisper amidst the din, echoing through songs of bravery and fall. His brothers, Gurth and Leofwine, stand with unwavering courage by his side, undeterred by the grim spectre hovering over the battle. Bound by blood and honour, their presence reinforces the Saxon spirit, even as the end looms ominously. They fight on with antique pride and relentless loyalty, their final stand a raw hymn to familial allegiance as the sun sets on an era. Their deaths, sacrificed on the altar of history, capture the inexorable force of fate. Their swords sing a tragic symphony of resilience against the swelling tide of Norman cavalry that tears through hope and defiance. With each swing they etch themselves into the soil, their legacy a spectral warning carried by the winds of a changing world. And when the shield wall collapses, it signifies more than just a tactical failure. It heralds the unmaking of a nation. The once formidable line of defence crumbles, its warriors bereft of the king's guiding light, as fear replaces solidarity and chaos reigns. Harold's demise sends a shadow across the English force, doubt seeping through their ranks as the ancient fabric of Saxon strength unravels thread by thread. The old guard's gravitational pull shatters, and with it, the unity holding firm against a Norman onslaught dissolves. The sound of splintering wood and the collapse of shields mirrors the warrior's spirit, leaving them exposed and vulnerable. Soon the battlefield's roar shifts, and the triumphant shouts give way to retreat's mournful cries. The zing of arrows yields to resignation as survivors sound the noise of despair. The sounds of conflict morph into an orchestra of retreat, where the clash of arms turns into the clatter of discarded weapons. Footfalls that once marched with purpose now scramble, driven by panic. Against this backdrop, the battlefield transforms from a theatre of resistance into one of sorrow. Its walls record the chilling shift from glory to ruin, encapsulating a requiem for a kingdom. The echoes of defeat linger in the air, each clang of steel a testament to despair. With the Saxon leadership gutted, the army teeters on the brink of disarray. Harold was the linchpin, his reign the scaffold that held together the Saxon realm. Its disintegration scatters dreams of a sovereign England into the winds. The king's death sends ripples far beyond the battlefield. This moment heralds not just the end of his reign, but the closure of an era, Anglo-Saxon rule relegated to memory. The dynasty that pulsated through England's veins for centuries is wiped away in an instant, leaving the future adrift in uncertainty. The unfurling Norman banner sweeps the remnants of Saxon glory aside, reshaping the kingdom with each calculated step. Castles rise, law and language morph. England, once steadfast, begins its transformation under Norman hands. Yet the echoes of Harold's life and loss reverberate, defying the passage of time. His story, a requiem of a noble struggle, remains woven into the cultural fabric, his brief reign immortalised in song and chronicle. Like Arthur, Harold endures as a symbol of resistance, a whisper in art and history, asserting the resilience of Anglo-Saxon endurance. He persists as a vessel of nostalgia, his story an echo of a past tinting the future. Even as the battle's dust settles, Senlac Hill bears witness to the seed of transformation. Language, governance, architecture, all reshaped by Norman influence, yet steeped in English nuance, as echoes of ambition and destiny collide. Harold's dream, though shattered, persists in the stories told by firelight. The echoes of 1066 entwine with modern identity, charting paths through history's fluid continuum. Each retelling, each remembrance, ensures Harold's story lingers in the soul of England, a spectral beacon of what was and what is to come. As the sun dipped below the horizon on October 14th, 1066, the field of Hastings lay silent, blanketed with the remains of a fierce clash. For William of Normandy, victory heralded not an end but a beginning. He comprehended the daunting task ahead, to solidify his rule over a land that seemed both alien and eerily familiar. The surviving English nobles had scattered, their allies silenced, leaving behind towns that echoed with grief. Yet William left nothing to chance. Hastings was merely the prologue to a larger conquest, a methodical transformation requiring the strategic might of Norman strongholds rising like foreboding guardians over England's lush terrain. Where once community and kinship governed, now stood stark stone sentinels. The castles, symbols of unyielding control and foreign dominance. Unlike the simple English forts, these stone giants were engineered for total dominance, functioning as military outposts, administrative centres, and ominous reminders of Norman supremacy. Within these walls, the alchemy of English and Norman life churned, as the old ways met new mandates prescribing feudal obligations. An utterly foreign notion to the English peasants who found themselves subjects in their own homeland. William was no idle conqueror, his grip extended beyond the ramparts. At the tip of his sword, lands were retitled, uprooted from Saxon hands, and bestowed to Norman lords. This was not a simple victory march, but a relentless reshaping of land, livelihood, and legacy. Landholders were replaced with men who had fought by William's side, their deeds rewarded with estates commandeered through conquest, their loyalty secured through land and lineage. Discontent smouldered beneath the surface, fueling uprisings from Northumbria to East Anglia, which William quashed with an unwavering hand, leaving scorch marks on the English psyche that spoke of inevitable surrender. Yet William's true mastery lay in his ambition to tax, control, and administer this newfound dominion with relentless precision. The creation of the Domesday Book in 1085 stood as a testament to his rule. No corner of the realm was too remote, no plot of land too inconsequential to escape its meticulous gaze. To the Anglo-Saxons, this day of judgment signified more than a ledger. It was the unyielding watch of Norman authority, cataloguing lives, lands, and legacies. Recorded were not just the holdings, but the very soul of England's transformation. An unblinking chronicle of conquest, casting a long shadow over a subjugated society. Insightful as any sword, the Domesday Book cemented the triumph of Norman order, a blend of administrative acuity and conquest's enduring reach. But castles and records were not the only tools of transformation. The conquerors introduced their language and law, woven into England's fabric with every decree and legal writ. French and Latin supplanted Old English, seeding confusion and exclusion among common folk. Yet, as decades turned and words intertwined, Middle English emerged, a linguistic tapestry that bore the marks of both conqueror and conquered. Legal reforms mirrored this linguistic fusion, instituting Norman justice that appeared foreign, yet proved pragmatic. Trials shifted towards inquisitive inquiry, writs replaced communal assemblies, and the complex dance of feudal rights took root in courts and councils alike. While initial resistance abounded, Norman law eventually enriched English governance, a testament to adaptation born out of necessity. At the heart of spiritual life, the English Church underwent its own realignment, as Norman bishops replaced their Saxon predecessors, shepherding congregations towards a marriage of faith and regime. With papal endorsement and William's iron will, the Church restructured ecclesiastical governance, aligning with Rome while subduing local customs. Towering cathedrals, echoing castles in their majesty, became symbolic watchwords of divine rule. Within these walls, sacred and secular converged, solidifying a Norman legacy, etched not only in stone but in the hearts of England's faithful. Amid this tapestry of conquest, an unexpected cultural exchange unfolded. Norman lords wed Saxon nobility, binding two bloodlines into a new genetic tapestry. Tales, customs, and cuisines mingled, transforming marketplaces, fairs, and family hearths into vibrant crucibles of shared tradition. Integration, slow yet inevitable, crept through all levels of society, gradually softening memories of strife in favour of a shared narrative imbued with mutual respect. Yet it was not only the past that shaped this new England. The framework William established heralded a new social order through the creation of a feudal pyramid, a hierarchy where every loyalty was born of land and oath. Lords gained autonomy but remained tethered to royal supremacy, their domains a patchwork of drilled allegiance. A vertical scaffold arose, imposing order through a latticework of obligation, yet enabling England to reclaim unity under a common monarch. In a twist of fate and irony, Norman rule not only absorbed elements of English customs, but also brought forth innovation that propelled England toward modernity. The paradoxes embedded in this hybrid governance, juxtaposing rigidity and flexibility, transformation and tradition, charted the course for an England poised for greatness. The legacy of 1066 proved more than military might. It was an enduring testament to adaptation and amalgamation. History speaking with voices merged, unified in diversity, and strengthened through shared struggle. In the aftermath of the Battle of Hastings, the English landscape, both physical and cultural, underwent an irreversible transformation. French ascended as the language of power, becoming the tongue of the court, the law, and the aristocracy. Imagine awakening one day to find yourself a stranger in your own land, with your language pushed to the fringes, replaced in daily transactions, marriages, legal proceedings. The native vernacular slowly gave way, reshaping Old English words into French nuances, embedding Norman authority into everyday life. Such linguistic colonisation not only infused new words but introduced ideas and social structures that changed a nation's identity at its core. Over generations, this melding birthed Middle English, sowing the seeds of a new, expressive literary flourish seen in Chaucer's tales, a slow metamorphosis visible much later but rooted in these early adaptations. Harold's fall at Hastings spelled doom for the Anglo-Saxon nobility, obliterating an ancient social order. The old powers, stripped of land and titles, faced either exile or death. The castles that rose in their place were not mere fortresses. They were looming symbols of a new regime, standing defiantly against any remnants of resistance. Without native leaders to rally opposition, the Normans restructured governance and law, with ecclesiastical leaders echoing their Norman counterparts. The Domesday Book, that great ledger of land and power, stands as perhaps the most enduring symbol, a comprehensive audit of resources, converting conquest into meticulous control. The Norman footprint etched itself into the hills with castles, bastions of strength, and administration. These formidable structures signified Norman vigilance, centres where taxes were levied and laws enforced. Each stone edifice served as a constant reminder of the conqueror's ever-watchful presence. In strategic locations on the sites of former Saxon strongholds, they redefined history, merging the past with an unequivocal sense of new rule. William's reshaping of land ownership rewove the fabric of loyalty and power. Vast tracts of countryside were bestowed upon loyal Normans, entrenching a feudal system that tied the land directly to the king's will. By scattering these parcels, William maintained control, denying any noble the means to mount effective resistance. This reorganisation did more than redistribute property. It wove a feudal web that bound nobles into a hierarchy of allegiance, shaping English aristocracy for centuries. Meanwhile, the Domesday Book declared the full measure of Norman grasp. Far more than an audit, it legitimised conquest, cataloguing every scrap of land, each soul, for royal command. This ledger is not just a symbol of supremacy, it indexes a turning point, documenting the transition from Saxon to Norman ownership, placing conquest down to paper with a finality that echoed across centuries. Beyond the reshuffled nobility, the new Norman aristocrats embedded their culture deeply, with norms of grandeur and hierarchy supplanting old traditions. This fusion was initially jarring, a mingling of bloodlines through calculated marriages, blending Norman culture with Saxon roots while ensuring dominance. Over time, this intermingling laid the groundwork for a ruling class, resilient, adaptable, and singularly English in identity. In governance, Norman influence etched a lasting legacy within English law, successfully blending Saxon customs with orderly Norman systems. The development of feudal courts simmered into the common law tradition, centralised and woven with the fairness to which a just king aspired. Concepts like trial by jury took hold, easing out variable local practices in favour of standardised justice administered across the land. These nascent shifts in legal frameworks pointed toward milestones like the Magna Carta, testament to a new narrative of governance, order, and, paradoxically, freedom. Yet these changes transcended the mundane. Architecture soared, with Romanesque structures springing from the earth, echoed later in the spires and buttresses of Gothic cathedrals. These new structures served dual purposes: defensive strongholds and awe-inspiring works of art. Their towers and stained glass windows reflected divine aspiration and a cultural evolution from turmoil toward identity. An edifice-made journey from conquest to legacy. Religion too, instant piece in the puzzle, saw the church's face alter drastically, aligning closely to continental models. Norman bishops replaced Saxon clerics, and the church in England was reshaped to ensure that ecclesiastical authority reinforced regal power. monastic life found new vigour, with abbeys flourishing not just as spiritual havens, but as centres of learning and economic resilience. The burgeoning influence of these religious centres gradually cultivated a continuity that stabilised the nation under one god, one king. Norman influence pervaded warfare itself, solidifying the chivalric ideals of knighthood. The martial spirit, governed by valour and loyalty, redefined warfare and class alike, epitomising the union of military skill and feudal loyalty. Concepts of knighthood and chivalric combat emerged, accompanied by the ceremonial grandeur of tournaments, reflecting both homage to martial prowess and a nod toward honour. The echoes of these ideals outlasted the initial need for conquest, growing into a celebrated tradition that continues to colour our understanding of the medieval world. From language to lineage, law to architecture, the Norman legacy embedded within English soil a distinct, though composite, identity, transformative, enduring, and as omnipresent in quiet libraries as in the echoes of hammer on stone. Far-reaching did that Norman shadow stretch across moors and centuries, not just in dominion but in the fibre of a civilization re-scripted by conquest.